They say a real king doesn't look over his shoulder. He doesn't have to. Because everyone else does. The bar was quiet in the way expensive places always are, soft jazz crawling across polished wood, crystal glasses catching amber light, conversations whispered instead of spoken. It was the kind of place where politicians pretended not to recognize crime bosses, and crime bosses pretended not to own politicians. And tonight, the most dangerous man in the city walked in without security at his side. He didn't need an introduction. Power has a presence. It bends the air, slows heartbeats, silences rooms without asking permission. He wore a black suit tailored like armor. No tie. Top button open. Tattoos creeping up his neck like warnings no one dared read aloud. His expression? Detached. The face of a man who had buried enemies and attended their funerals with the same cold eyes. This wasn't just another bar. It was his bar. Technically, the ownership ran through shell corporations and offshore accounts. But everyone who mattered knew the truth. This was neutral ground. A sanctuary for underworld negotiations. No guns. No blood. No chaos. At least that was the rule. He took his usual seat at the far end of the counter, back to the mirror, eyes on the room through reflection. Always watching. Always calculating. A bartender approached. She looked new. Mid-20s. Composed but not immune to nerves. Her posture was disciplined, but her fingers trembled just slightly as she placed a crystal whiskey glass in front of him. 12-year-aged single malt. His favorite. He didn't look at her. Didn't thank her. He simply stared at the drink. Amber liquid. 2 cubes of ice. Perfect pour. But something was different. A small white napkin sat beneath the glass. Folded thicker than necessary. His eyes shifted, barely. He lifted the glass slowly. And that's when he saw it. Ink pressed through the napkin fibers. Handwritten. 3 lines. Don't drink it. Smile and leave. Now. The music didn't stop. No one screamed. Nothing dramatic happened. But in that single second, the temperature in the room dropped. He didn't flinch. Didn't tense. Didn't even blink. A lesser man would have shoved the glass away. Stormed out. Drawn a weapon. Started a massacre. But he wasn't a lesser man. He was a king. And kings do not react. They observe. Slow, he placed the glass back on the counter. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. But deliberately. Across the room, one of his captains shifted in his seat. Subtle. Almost invisible. But not invisible to him. Interesting. The bartender was still standing there. Waiting. Her breathing shallow. He finally looked up at her. And in that moment, her composure cracked. Just slightly. Enough. He reached forward. Not fast. Not violent. But controlled. His hand wrapped around her wrist. Unmovable. The room felt it. Conversations slowed. Eyes turned away quickly. No one wanted to witness what happened next. His voice, when he spoke, was calm. Almost gentle. Who sent you? Her pulse jumped beneath his fingers. I don't know what you mean, she whispered. But not a professional one. Fear was real. But so was resolve. He leaned closer. Close enough to smell her perfume. Close enough that no one else could hear him. If it's poison, he said softly, then someone thinks I'm careless. His eyes flicked toward the mirrored wall. 3 exits. 2 security cameras. 1 captain pretending not to watch. If it's not poison, he continued, then someone wants me to panic. He tightened his grip, just enough to remind her who held power. And that, he said, means this isn't about a drink. Her eyes met his for the first time. There was not hatred, not fear, urgency. You don't understand, she breathed. Please, just smile, stand up, and walk out. He studied her face like a puzzle. People had tried to kill him before. Car bombs, snipers, friends. He survived because he expected betrayal. But this was different. This was intimate, calculated. He released her wrist slowly. The imprint of his fingers lingered on her skin. Instead of leaving, he picked up the glass again. The entire room froze without knowing why. He raised it slightly, as if making a toast. His captain across the room went rigid. The bartender's face drained of color. And then, he didn't drink. He lowered the glass, turned it slightly in the light. Watching. Waiting. The ice cube shifted. Tiny ripple. Almost invisible. Almost. His eyes narrowed. Interesting. Very interesting. He placed the glass down once more. Then he did the most dangerous thing a powerful man can do. He stayed seated. And smiled. Not because he felt safe, but because he understood something now. If someone had orchestrated this, if someone believed tonight was the night the king would fall, then they had made one critical mistake. They warned him. He looked back at the bartender. This time, his voice dropped to a whisper edged with steel. You just saved someone's life. The pause. Now tell me whose. The most dangerous threats aren't the ones you see. They're the ones that know your schedule. The kingpin didn't raise his voice. Didn't stand. Didn't signal his men. He simply looked at the bartender and asked, almost softly, You just saved someone's life. Now tell me whose. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The jazz music continued floating through the bar, smooth and elegant, mocking the tension coiling beneath the surface. Around them, glasses clinked. Laughter flickered. Deals were whispered in coded language. But at the far end of the counter, the atmosphere had shifted. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. It's not the drink. His eyes sharpened. He had already suspected that. Poison was simple, amateur, predictable. This felt layered. What is it then? He asked. Her fingers brushed the edge of the napkin. You're not supposed to leave alive tonight. Across the room, his most trusted captain adjusted his cufflinks. Too slow. Too deliberate. The kingpin noticed everything. He didn't turn to look. Instead, he studied the reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The captain's jaw was tight. One of the other men near him kept checking his phone. Signals. Patterns. Press. Who else knows? He asked. She hesitated. More than you think. A silence fell between them, not loud, but heavy. The kind of silence that changes the course of empires. The kingpin tapped the rim of his glass lightly. One of his security men stepped closer from a distance, reading the subtle cue. Without breaking eye contact with the bartender, the kingpin spoke calmly. Lock the exits. No panic. No announcement. Just a quiet shift in control. The heavy doors at both ends of the bar clicked shut electronically. Most guests didn't even notice. Those who did assumed it was routine. The captain across the room finally stood. He walked toward the bar with measured confidence. Boss, he said smoothly, everything all right? The kingpin smiled faintly. Perfect. A lie. But a strategic one. The captain's gaze flicked toward the whiskey glass. Then toward the bartender. Too quick. Too assessing. The kingpin saw it. And that was when his phone vibrated. He didn't flinch. He never did. He glanced down at the screen beneath the counter. A message. No name. No number. Just a photo. His private driver, unconscious on the pavement beside his armored car. Blood near the temple. Timestamp, 3 minutes ago. The kingpin's pulse did not change. But something colder replaced the air in his lungs. This wasn't about a poison drink. This was about isolation. If the driver was down, his exit route was compromised. If the exit was compromised, this wasn't just an attempt. It was choreography. He slowly looked back at the bartender. You knew about this. It wasn't a question. Her voice trembled now. I found out an hour ago. I wasn't supposed to see the message. What message? She swallowed. They were celebrating. In the back office. Said by midnight the throne would be empty. The captain shifted his stance slightly. Almost imperceptible. But not to a man who built an empire by reading micromovements. The kingpin stood up. Finally. The room felt it immediately. Power rising. Conversations thinned. Music seemed quieter, though it hadn't changed. He lifted the whiskey glass and held it at eye level. Gentlemen, he called calmly to the room, a toast. Every head turned. Even the captain froze for half a second. To loyalty, the kingpin continued, voice smooth. Because without it, We are nothing. He tilted the glass slightly, but didn't drink. Instead, he set it back down deliberately. And then, he slid it across the counter toward the captain. The room stopped breathing. The captain looked at the glass. Then at him. A flicker of calculation. Drink, the Kingpin said quietly. The word wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The captain gave a thin smile. Boss, what is this? Trust, he replied. A stare held between them, seconds stretching like wire pulled too tight. The bartender stepped back slowly. Something was unraveling faster now. Another vibration. Another message. This time, a live security feed screenshot. The back office. 2 of his lieutenants were there. One holding a laptop. The screen displayed financial transfers. Millions. Moved offshore. Frozen accounts. Assets rerouted. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already happening. The Kingpin's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with clarity. The poison drink had been theater. The real attack was financial. Strategic. Precise. And internal. He looked at the captain one last time. You're nervous, he observed calmly. The captain's jaw tightened. About what? The Kingpin leaned closer. About timing. A flicker in the captain's eyes. The confirmation. But before the Kingpin could speak again, the lights flickered. Just once. Then twice. Gasps rippled softly through the room. Emergency generators hummed faintly. And in that brief half-second of dimness, the captain's hand moved toward his jacket. The Kingpin didn't hesitate. He stepped back, hands sliding inside his own coat. But before either man could act, a gunshot echoed from the back of the bar. Not near them. Behind them. A scream followed. Chaos trying to break through the surface. The Kingpin turned slowly toward the sound. Not panicked. Not rushed. Calculating. Because now he understood the truth. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a coup. And someone had just accelerated the schedule. He glanced once more at the bartender. You said midnight, he murmured. She nodded, barely breathing. He checked the watch on his wrist. 11:52 p.m. He smiled. 8 minutes early. Empires don't fall in explosions. They fall in silence. The gunshots still echoed in the walls of the bar when the Kingpin realized something terrifying. The chaos wasn't random. It was synchronized. Screams rose from the back hallway. Glass shattered. Chairs scraped against marble floors. The polished elegance of the room fractured into raw panic. But he didn't move. He stood still. Stillness is power. And power, in moments like this, is oxygen. Seal the interior, he ordered calmly. His men reacted instantly. 2 rushed toward the hallway. 1 pulled the captain back slightly. Another scanned the room for additional threats. The captain. The Kingpin turned slowly toward him. Interesting timing, he said quietly. The captain's face was pale now, but not with guilt. With confusion. I didn't, he began. Don't, the Kingpin interrupted. If you're going to lie, at least make it creative. Another phone vibrated. Not his. One of the lieutenants near the back glanced down before he could stop himself. That was the mistake. The Kingpin noticed everything. Bring me his phone, he said. The lieutenant hesitated. 2 security men stepped forward. Within seconds, the phone was in the Kingpin's hand. Unlocked. A group message thread. For names. 3 he recognized instantly. 4. Saved only as Crown. His jaw tightened slightly. The messages were time-stamped over the past week. Phase 1. Isolate. Driver handled. Accounts frozen at 2350. Bar distraction confirmed. Bar distraction. The whiskey. The note. The warning. The Kingpin's mind moved faster than the panic around him. This was not an emotional betrayal. It was structural. A dismantling. Surgical. His empire wasn't under attack from outside. It was being hollowed out from within. Another message popped up in the thread. Warehouse East raided. Police tipped. The Kingpin looked up slowly. Police. That changed everything. This wasn't just a coup. It was collaboration. He stepped away from the captain and scanned the room. Some faces showed fear. Some confusion. And a few. Calculation. Those were the dangerous ones. Check all properties, he ordered. Now. Within seconds, calls began going out. Responses returned almost immediately. Warehouse East, raided. Dockyard storage, seized. 2 mid-level accountants, missing. Offshore accounts, temporarily locked pending investigation. The Kingpin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Pressure. Pressure meant someone intelligent was on the other side of this. Someone patient. Someone who understood that killing a king makes a martyr, but bankrupting him makes him irrelevant. He looked back at the bartender. She was watching him carefully. Not like prey. Like someone measuring a storm. You knew it was bigger, he said. She nodded faintly. They've been meeting for months, she whispered. Back office. After hours. Who's they? She hesitated. And that hesitation told him more than a name would have. You don't know the top, she admitted. I never heard the voice. Only the instructions. The Kingpin looked at the captain again. You still want that drink? He asked quietly. The captain's composure finally cracked. This isn't me, he insisted. You think I'd risk everything? The Kingpin tilted his head slightly. Yes. Silence. Because in this world, loyalty lasts only as long as power does. And power was shifting. Suddenly, one of his security men approached quickly. Boss, the back office. What about it? The cameras were disabled. When? Exactly 30 seconds before the gunshot. Precision. The Kingpin exhaled slowly. Then something clicked. The gunshot. It hadn't been aimed at him. It was a signal. He turned toward the hallway just as 2 men returned, dragging someone between them. A body. One of his own lieutenants. Shot cleanly through the shoulder. Alive. Barely. He fired first, one guard explained. Then tried to run. The wounded lieutenant looked up at the Kingpin, panic flooding his face. It wasn't supposed to go like this, he gasped. The room went silent. The Kingpin crouched slowly in front of him. Then how was it supposed to go? The man swallowed hard. You were supposed to leave after the note. Quietly. That's what we were told. The Kingpin's eyes darkened. Told by who? That wasn't the plan, the lieutenant continued weakly. The plan was to make it look like you stepped down. Financial collapse. Police pressure. No blood. Step down. He almost laughed. They weren't trying to assassinate him. They were trying to erase him. Strip the myth. Destroy the legend. Turn a king into a rumor. The lieutenant coughed, blood staining his collar. He said you'd never see him coming, the man whispered. The Kingpin asked quietly. But the lieutenant's eyes rolled back. Unconscious. Or worse. The Kingpin stood slowly. Everything was shifting now. The captain. The lieutenants. The police. The frozen assets. This wasn't one traitor. It was architecture. And somewhere above all of it, the anonymous name in the thread. The architect of his unraveling. The Kingpin looked around the room. At the cracked loyalty. At the fear creeping into faces that once showed devotion. Empires don't collapse all at once. They fracture. Quietly. Internally. He checked his watch. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes to midnight. The bartender stepped closer. They think you're cornered, she said softly. He looked at her. Cornered? Cornered men panic. Kings adapt. But for the first time in years, he didn't know where the real enemy was standing. And that uncertainty, that was the crack. The lights flickered again. This time longer. And somewhere outside, sirens wailed in the distance. A kingdom doesn't collapse when the enemy attacks. It collapses when the king hesitates. The sirens outside grew louder. Not close enough to be at the door, but close enough to matter. Inside the bar, the illusion of control was thinning. Loyalty had turned fragile. Eyes that once lowered in respect now lifted in calculation. The Kingpin stood motionless at the center of it all. Still, observing, measuring who was breathing too fast, who avoided eye contact, who was texting under the table. Because betrayal leaves fingerprints, if you know how to look. Everyone stays, he said calmly. No shouting. No threats. But the authority in his voice pressed down on the room like gravity. The captain stepped forward again. "Boss, we need to relocate. This is compromised." The Kingpin turned slowly. "Compromised?" he repeated. "Or redirected?" A flicker of irritation crossed the captain's face. There it is. Cracks weren't just in the Empire. They were in the men. The Kingpin walked toward the back office corridor where the gunshot had echoed minutes earlier. The wounded lieutenant had been taken away. Blood still marked the marble floor in a thin, accusing line. He crouched briefly, studying the splatter pattern. Close range. Deliberate. The shot wasn't panic. It was scheduled. He stood again. "They're accelerating," he murmured. The bartender approached quietly from behind him. "You weren't supposed to stay," she said. He didn't look at her. "And you weren't supposed to warn me," he replied. Silence. That silence was heavier than the sirens. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why risk your life?" She hesitated. Because the truth was dangerous. And dangerous truths change power. Before she could answer, one of his security men rushed forward. "Boss, you need to see this." A tablet was placed in his hand. Live financial data. More accounts draining. More transfers completed. Shell companies dissolving in real time. This wasn't theft. It was systematic erasure. And then, a message appeared on the screen. From Crown. No number. Encrypted channel. Just one line. "Watch how a king falls without a single bullet." The Kingpin's jaw tightened. Psychological warfare. This wasn't about killing him. It was about humiliation. Public collapse. Stripped influence. Frozen assets. Police pressure. Internal rebellion. A bloodless dethroning. He almost admired it. Almost. Behind him, the captain shifted his weight again. "You're thinking too much," the captain said cautiously. "We need action." The Kingpin turned slowly. "You're right," he agreed. The room held its breath. He walked back toward the bar. Picked up the untouched whiskey glass. Held it at eye level once more. He smiled. Not angrily. Not nervously. But knowingly. The kind of smile that unsettles allies more than enemies. "You all think this is happening to me," he said quietly. His voice carried now. Commanding. Controlled. "But you've misunderstood something." He set the glass down gently. "If my empire falls, every one of you falls with it." The weight of that truth rippled through the room. Because power protected them. Without him, they were exposed. Replaceable. Disposable. The captain swallowed. The bartender watched carefully. And then, another vibration. This time from the Kingpin's private line. Only 3 people in the world had that number. He glanced at the screen. A photo. Faded. Him at 16. Standing beside a man long believed dead. A man who once mentored him. A man who disappeared the night the Kingpin took power. Under the image was a single message. "You built your throne on my bones." The air left the room. Not physically. But emotionally. This wasn't just a coup. It was history resurfacing. The bartender stepped closer. "You know who it is," she whispered. He didn't answer. But his silence confirmed everything. The captain noticed the shift. "Boss." No response. Because the Kingpin wasn't looking at the captain anymore. He was looking backward in time. At unfinished business. At ghosts. At foundations that weren't as buried as he thought. And suddenly, everything made sense. The precision. The patience. The refusal to spill blood. Only someone who understood how he built his empire could dismantle it this cleanly. Someone who taught him. Or someone who survived him. The sirens outside grew louder now. Closer. Police lights flickered faintly against the tinted windows. The clock on the wall ticked softly. 11:59 p.m. The captain's composure was cracking. "We need to move. Now." The Kingpin finally looked at him. Cold. Measured. And then he laughed softly. A quiet, dangerous sound. "No," he said. The word cut through the room. "They want me to run." He straightened his jacket. Adjusted his cuffs. Perfect composure. "They want the king to look afraid." He picked up the whiskey glass again. Turned toward the mirrored wall. Studied every face behind him. the loyal, the wavering, the guilty, and somewhere out there, watching, waiting for collapse. The Kingpin raised the glass slightly. Not to drink, but in acknowledgement. A throne isn't lost in one night, he murmured. Then he set the glass down untouched, and smiled, because if this was a fall, it wouldn't be the one they expected. Midnight struck. The lights flickered again, and this time, the front doors of the bar began to unlock automatically. From the outside. Midnight doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, and sometimes it brings ghosts. The front doors of the bar unlocked with a mechanical click that echoed louder than any gunshot that night. Every man in the room turned. Some reached instinctively for weapons. Some froze. But the Kingpin, he didn't move. Because he already knew. This wasn't police. This wasn't rivals. This was personal. The doors opened slowly. No dramatic entrance. No army. Just one man walking in alone. Older. Silver at the temples. A tailored coat draped over shoulders that still carried authority. His posture was relaxed. Too relaxed. The kind of calm that belongs to someone who believes he has already won. The room parted instinctively. Respect doesn't disappear with time. It waits. The Kingpin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The bartender's breath caught. The captain looked confused. But the Kingpin knew. He had seen that face before. Years ago. On a night soaked in blood and ambition. You're supposed to be dead, the Kingpin said quietly. The older man smiled. Dead men don't build empires, he replied. The voice was unmistakable. The mentor. The architect. The man who had once taught him how to think 3 moves ahead. The man he had betrayed to take the throne. Or so everyone believed. The ghost stepped fully into the room. No guns, he said calmly. Let's not ruin the theater. The Kingpin's men hesitated. But the Kingpin lifted one finger slightly. Stand down. The older man nodded in approval. You always were disciplined, he said. That's why I chose you. The word lingered. Chose. The Kingpin stepped forward. You taught me to eliminate threats, he said. So I did. A faint chuckle. You misunderstood the lesson. Silence swallowed the room. The older man walked slowly toward the bar, eyes scanning the cracked empire around him. You thought killing me made you king, he continued. But you were never meant to sit forever. The Kingpin's eyes hardened. This was your doing. Of course, the ghost replied simply. No denial. No drama. Just truth. The captain looked between them, realization dawning too late. The frozen accounts. The police raids. The internal fractures. All orchestrated not by greed, but by patience. You built everything on the foundation I laid, the older man said. The routes. The offshore channels. The political leverage. I simply reclaimed it. The bartender stepped closer to the Kingpin. You knew, she whispered. He didn't respond. Because yes, somewhere deep down, he had always known unfinished business doesn't stay buried. You see, the ghost continued, I didn't want you dead. He gestured around the room. I wanted you exposed. The sirens outside cut off suddenly. Silence replaced them. Deal made. Pressure applied. Leverage demonstrated. The older man stopped just a few feet away. You built your legend on betrayal, he said softly. Now you understand the cost. The room felt smaller. Heavier. The Kingpin finally spoke. You could have taken it back quietly, he said. Why the spectacle? A faint smile. Because kings don't fall in silence. Their eyes locked. Years of history compressed into a single stare. Student. Future. Betrayer. Architect. The bartender watched carefully. This was more than power. This was legacy. You warned me once, the Kingpin said slowly. About weakness. The older man nodded. And you ignored me. The Kingpin stepped closer. Close enough that only they could hear the next words. You think I didn't see this coming? For the first time, the ghost hesitated. Just slightly. You froze accounts, the Kingpin continued. You triggered raids. You turned lieutenants. You wanted me cornered. He leaned in. But I stayed. The older man's expression shifted. Confusion. Calculation. What did you do? He asked quietly. The Kingpin finally smiled fully. Not defensive. Not afraid. Strategic. You taught me something else, he said. Always build a second throne. A vibration interrupted the tension. It was the older man's phone. He glanced down. And for the first time that night, his composure cracked. Multiple alerts. Accounts reversing. Assets reappearing. Transfers rerouted again. Not stolen. The Kingpin had let it happen. Every transaction. Every betrayal. Every shift. Documented. Monitored. You dismantled what I wanted you to see, the Kingpin said calmly. Not what I protected. The captain stared in disbelief. The bartender's eyes widened. The ghost looked back up slowly. You staged this, he realized. The Kingpin tilted his head slightly. No, he corrected. You did. A long silence stretched between them. Because now, neither man was certain who truly controlled the board. Police lights suddenly flared outside again. But this time, not targeting the Kingpin's properties. The ghost's offshore partners. The docks he had quietly reclaimed. His hidden leverage. He looked at the Kingpin. Pride flickered behind his frustration. You finally learned, he said softly. The Kingpin nodded once. From the best. The doors behind the ghost opened again. More footsteps. But we don't see who enters. The camera stays on the two men. The past. And the present. Balanced on a knife's edge. The ghost smiled faintly. So tell me, he asked quietly, are you the king now, or just better at surviving? The Kingpin didn't answer. He simply picked up the whiskey glass one last time. Untouched. Untainted. He raised it slowly. And this time, he drank. Cut to black.